Question. Why don't the Democrats like kids? I love kids. I love my grandchildren. I love my children. I love kids. Why don't they like kids?
Can you elaborate on your question? What makes you think that Democrats don't like kids? I mean, let's just take this. Let's take personal out of it. I mean, I love my kids, my grandkids, my nieces and nephews, so I don't have a problem with kids. But let's talk about it. You said Democrats. Let's talk about it from a political party standpoint. Which of the two political parties, Democrat or Republican, and those are the two parties we talk about because they're the only two parties that have any real chance of being elected. Which of those two parties, Democrat or Republican, are trying to make sure that children, especially children from impoverished neighborhoods and households, can get breakfast and lunch at school so that they can stay focused and they can learn? Which party is that? Is that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? It's the Democratic Party. The Republicans are fighting to cut funding like that. So if you saw a political party that was like, hey, we need to make sure these kids have food, and you saw another political party going, fuck those kids, that's not our problem, which one would you say likes kids and which one would you say has a problem with kids? Which one of the two parties, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, wants to expand funding for education? And which party wants to abolish the Department of Education and cut back as much funding as humanly possible? That'll give you an indicator as to which political party likes and doesn't like kids. Now, it depends, I suppose, as to what you mean by like kids, because the Republican parties do fight for kids in some areas. For example, in multiple states across this country, the Republican Party has fought and continues to fight against children being allowed to marry. That they're in favor of marrying 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. So I guess you could say that from that perspective, Republicans do in fact like kids a lot more than Democrats. Hell, the current Republican president was best friends with the world's most renowned child trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein. Lord knows the current Republican president sure did have a fondness for his own daughter when she was a youngin'. Bragged about walking into a teenage dressing room so he could see teenage girls undressed. Ooh. Listen, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to assume, but you have been led down a path of misinformation if you are under the impression that Democrats don't like kids and somehow Republicans do. Ted Cruz can't even get his own kids to give him a kiss. Let's see what other content you have to offer.
When I was in junior high, we had 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th for junior high. And I had an English teacher that loved Miss Piggy. So she went and had a facelift to look like Miss Piggy. So mental illness in teachers started way back then. It just started with turning yourself into a fictional character. Now it's grown to men can be women. And it's ridiculous. I can't take it anymore. I'm so glad my kids are not in school anymore, and I'm glad they're in their 30s now so they don't have to deal with that shit. But I worry about my grandchildren. I don't want my grandchild turning gay or being trans because they learned it from a teacher. I want them to learn it on their own and how they feel.
Oh, good Lord. People don't turn gay or trans because they were taught that gay and trans people exist in school. People are gay and trans because they're gay and trans. I have news for you. You went to school with people who were gay or bi or possibly even trans, but didn't bring that out into the open because back then, even back when I was a youngster, it was frowned upon. It was shunned. It was publicly shamed and mocked, sadly. So, on top of being fed a mountain of misinformation about Democrats' position towards children, you're homophobic and transphobic. Awesome. What else?
You know, besides of you, Rachel Maddow needs to be fired. We should get that woman fired.
So, you want The View gone and Rachel Maddow gone. Write a strongly worded email, Edna. What else you got?
Article 2 of the Constitution states that the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. In other words, it is the President that defines the executive branch. When you read this language, it says that no court may take over that role. No court may define or limit the scope of the duties of an official of the executive office of the President, the people who work in the executive office. I think that what your amendment does is a violation of separation of powers, and it's a violation of Article 2.
Nowhere in Article 2 does it say that the court shall not this and the court shall not this. The Constitution is what defines the executive branch, not the President of the United States of America. And a violation of the separation of powers is what we see going on right now with the executive branch, headed up by Donald Trump, ignoring orders from the judicial branch, which is a co-equal and separate branch of government that exists to be a check on the executive branch. That, right there, is a violation of the separation of powers. The executive branch is acting in a dictatorial manner while ignoring a constitutionally approved co-equal branch of government that is a check on its powers. But you're, on top of being misinformed, homophobic, and transphobic, also one of those people that desires a dictator who will rule via fiat against the wording of the Constitution. And you want to shut down free press and free speech that you don't like. Have you checked out the price of a one bedroom in Moscow? Because I think that country is going to be a little bit more your speed.